What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Bluefort Blueprint. Thanks so much for watching. We've been doing this for 2 or 3 episodes right now, and you've shown us great support. We're back this week with Sayyam and Viraj, and we're going to talk about, the latest world of business and finance, just like we always do. I think the first thing that we wanted to speak about this week is Japan, and what's going on in Japan is really, really interesting because there's been a complete breakdown in the relationship of their economy versus their equity stock markets. Since 1989, I think the equity markets have touched an all-time high, right? For the first time, yeah. And that also after 3 decades, right? But their economy at the same time is now in a technical recession. We've seen in the last 2 quarters, the GDP has actually shrunk. तो ऐसे भी markets होते हैं दुनिया में where the equity markets are an all-time high and economy is an all-time low. So how do we explain this? What is going on?
So it's interesting. Japan is a very interesting example of what's happened in the market, how it was really booming in the 70s, the 80s. Up until 1989, it was an economy that was doing really well. And then they entered what is called the lost decades of Japan. The next 3 decades, the economy has really struggled. To put some numbers to what you said, in 2012, their economy peaked at $6.2 trillion. And today, they've fallen to 4.2 trillion. So the last 12 years, the economy has fallen substantially. And yet, over the same period, the stock market has gone up 4.5x. And if you think about it, it doesn't make sense because from a macro perspective, everything, all the data points show to the economy struggling, and yet investors are pouring money in. Warren Buffett has taken big positions in Japan. And I think one of the major reasons for this is the biggest problem they had in the last 3 decades was deflation, where prices kept coming down and hence that impacted the economy, how much people are spending. And now they seem to have finally gotten out of deflation, and people are optimistic that this will in turn kick off a new growth cycle for them. So I think that is a major reason why this kind of difference between the economy and the market.
But let's say as the three of us are wealth advisors, right? You tell me from a client's perspective, you are a wealth advisor in Japan. You're managing a fund or you're managing some AUM over there, right?
Yeah.
In 1989 to 2024, where people barely saw any returns, right now it's become, it's finally gone above that, right?
Correct.
What kind of, questions would you foresee from your clients, and what kind of, what would be your output there, or how would you control those kind of behaviors, right? Because to me, it's crazy. 30 years, 34 years,
Yeah.
market's not moving. हम अगर समझो आज से लेके 2050 तक इंडियन मार्केट ना चले तो the kind of questions we face, business तो बंद ही करना पड़ेगा, right?
Correct.
That's the idea.
Yeah, so I think that one concept that people don't understand in India, or it's difficult to grasp in India because that's never happened, is that the equity markets can be very, very uncorrelated or to the economy, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, the Nikkei is what, the top 200 stocks or
225.
225 stocks. So the top 225 stocks can be and the way they perform can actually, and their story can be very different to what's happening in the economy. From what my understanding is that in 1990s, Japan started losing its competitive edge. They started losing productivity because a lot of manufacturing then started going to China. So a lot of the Japanese products that we used, if you remember when we were younger, we used to only buy Japanese products.
Correct.
When it used to be electronics, right? All of our houses had only Japanese products, but now we only have Chinese products. So they started losing their edge.
Right.
Okay, and also what happened is their population at the same time really started declining.
Right.
Old age. There was no new from what I understand is that the Japanese government did not do anything to solve these fundamental matters, right? They did not bring in an immigration policy.
Right.
Like the US, for example, also has a great, we spoke about this in the last episode also, they have a great immigration policy, right? And Japan has none of that. So new young people with innovation
barely
and a
see
fresh...
them going to Japan, right?
Yeah, nobody is coming into that country,
right?
What the government kept doing is they tried to control the problems with a monetary policy. कि interest rates और कम कर देते हैं, तो inflation आएगा.
Right.
लेकिन what they were not able to understand, and this is a really good case study, is that only your monetary policy is not enough to fix the fundamental problems.
Right.
आप किसी को अगर interest rate 0% पे भी दे रहे हो, लेकिन कोई लोन लेने वाला ही नहीं है, so what is the point of doing that, right? So that is a huge lesson that even China at this point in time can learn from Japan, because I think they're going through a similar stage right now.
I agree.
It's interesting in a way because throughout our studies, right, even when we were young, you guys were in Hong Kong, I was here, right? The one thing that we've always learned is that Japan as a country, great manufacturing setup, great people, great overall, they are
Great work ethic.
great work ethic as well. But one problem which was fundamentally always there was the demographics within them. They always had an aging population, and right now we can see how that aging population, the correlation with the economy, with the stock markets, and small things like these,
Correct.
which as you mentioned about China is also a problem,
Yeah.
because their government had curbed down so many policies, birth control and stuff like that, right? So what do you think is going to happen with China though?
I think China is kind of now entering the stage where Japan was 30 years ago. What China did to Japan, basically, I think some other countries will end up doing to China, or China is going to end up going through that as well.
India hopefully will do it to China.
I mean, we hope so. But
I'm pretty sure it's going to be India only. Yeah.
I mean, probably most likely candidate is India, but China is going through those same issues. I mean, manufacturing, they're the kings of the world right now, but that's
Right.
gradually going to move to other countries. Bigger than that, the problem is the aging population, and
In
the
China
population
also.
is falling. So last 2 years, for the last 2 consecutive years, the population has actually fallen, and
And
that
again, they have no immigration policy.
they have no immigration policy. They don't
Yeah.
like people coming there. They're pretty closed off in that sense culturally. So similar to what Japan was. And the third issue is that the real estate prices there have come down significantly. That used to be 30% of their GDP at one
Right.
point. And if that single industry is going to take such a big hit, the overall GDP is going to start struggling.
Actually, this is a similar pattern I've in Japan, China. We spoke about Baiju's also.
Right.
Really, it's the same thing happening. When you propel growth to an unnatural speed, right? You're basically only borrowing growth from the future.
Right.
There has to be a downside. It's like I feel the analogy is like taking drugs, like drinking too much alcohol in the night or taking some ecstasy
You're
or
gonna have a
cocaine and
bad
all of that. The following day you're going to have a crash because what you've done is you've just borrowed energy from the next day. That's
Right.
all that's happening. So
Yeah.
these economies also did that, where growth was highlighted, or there was so much effort put only on growth that when now their days come where that crash is coming, and I think India is going quite well in the sense that they have realized this, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Right.
But we are growing at a more sustainable and better pace, and I think people like to criticize India, but this is a better way of doing things rather than what China did.
It'll take us longer than what it took China, but then hopefully then this kind of crash shouldn't come.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to speak to you guys about is real estate. That's a conversation that Indian real estate specifically, it's a conversation we've been having a lot. A lot of our clients are now looking to purchase a property. There's some element of FOMO kicking in as well because property prices have gone up so much. People are paying a lot more rent now than they were 2-3 years ago. And what do you guys think about that? That real estate, is it something that's going to continue like that? Is it a bubble? Why is it happening? Your thoughts on that?
See, I don't think it's a bubble per se. See, it's very easy to say that कि ये bubble है, वो bubble है because एक price इधर से उधर चली गई है. But आप देखोगे तो 2008 or earlier, at least जितनी हमें समझ है, since 2008 the prices had not moved massively till COVID, right? Till in COVID it went down. Then
Since
it's come up.
2013, actually, I think
Since 2013,
the
right?
prices kept going up.
And since 2013 also, when the prices were not moving, there were a lot of regulations done by the government which were favorable for real estate. पहले problems real estate में क्या थे, builder पैसे लेके भाग जाते थे, illiquidity था, जो भी था, right? Through RERA and everything, the framework has been set up very nicely.
Yeah.
So real estate, I don't think it's in a bubble. There are still many cities in the tier 2, tier 3 where the prices are also increasing rapidly, correct? Because people are now from Bombay or let's say from Bangalore or from Delhi, they are going back to their, if it's their hometowns, then there are new industries coming up in, let's say, UP, Indore, Gujarat. So people are moving to those places. So the prices are bound to rise. The problem here is with the inventory which is available in cities like Mumbai and Bangalore and Delhi and stuff like that, right, which are already packed now with real estate. So for example, if just take a bottoms up approach over here, okay, if you move in Juhu Vile Parle where I stay, correct, in one lane, at least 80 to 90% of the buildings are under redevelopment. Correct.
Yeah.
Most of the places are now under redevelopment. फिर वो redevelopment बन के वो 6-7 जो 2-3 माले की building 6-7-8 माले की बन जाती है. Then there are those prices rise up very fast. Then there are gated communities. There is Starbucks coming in every second building, third building, stuff like that, right? Which is again going to propel the prices to a higher level. So it's not a bubble, but the quality of housing has increased and the quality of the buildings, they've increased nicely.
So my observation is that a lot of gated communities and fancy buildings, like for example in the south you can say
Correct.
Prestige, over here Lodha and Oberoi's, DLF in Gurgaon. Like DLF mein we've been reading ek ghante mein the entire
Sold out,
apartment
yeah.
complex gets sold out. So people obviously have more dispensable income, and they are choosing to move to more gated communities. So prices are rising over there. And I think we discussed this earlier as well, that in the old part of the cities, interestingly, the prices are not actually increasing at all.
Yeah.
And what you said about redevelopment, especially in Mumbai, because we stay in Mumbai, we know for a fact, is that the belt from, I think, Andheri to Bandra, there are thousands of buildings. Not actually from
Completely
Borivali to
Borivali,
Bandra.
yeah.
Borivali to Bandra, there are thousands of buildings that are going into redevelopment.
Correct.
And with these, extra income that people have, they want to move into gated communities, and the supply over there is still limited. The supply of real estate in general is very high, but good quality supply is still limited.
Exactly.
Which is why I think that right now the increase in price is justified. But now अगर अपन धारावी का एग्जांपल लेते हैं, पूरा का पूरा धारावी redevelopment में जाने वाला है. So the supply is going to increase massively, right? We're going to have like we grew up in Hong Kong, and it's just vertical, right? Buildings keep getting taller and taller, which is going to happen in Mumbai as well. We're already seeing like 100-floor buildings, residential buildings in Mumbai. So I think in the next 5-6 years, when redevelopment starts taking place, at that point in time, maybe real estate prices should come back down. And I am not too bullish, to be honest, on real estate, because after 5-6 years, rental yields are high right now, but later something, because of this reason, I don't see real estate prices increasing too much.
Look at the offices also we go to now, right? Compared to what it was 5 years, 10 years ago. Most of these offices in Lower Parel, or even Andheri for that matter, right? In Bombay especially, they have all like brilliant buildings, brilliant infrastructure. They have a cafe in them, and these are small things, right? But these are the things that drive the rent higher. And that is why in the last 2-3 years, especially after COVID, and since the work from home has ended and everything, people are coming back to offices. The rents have been, increasing steeply, and that's about it.
So with real estate, one fundamental thing is that the demand keeps inching up over time as the economy is doing well. People are making more money. People want to upgrade their lifestyles, go from a 2 BHK to a 3 BHK, and that happens in a steady, everyday basis, every year basis. The supply actually works in cycles. There are boom periods like what's happening now. You look around Mumbai, you look around Bangalore, Delhi. There's so many construction projects happening. Right? There's going to be a lot of inventory that's going to come in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And at that point, when the supply will eventually catch up to the demand and maybe outpace it. At that point, supply will be higher. We saw before COVID, 5-6 years before now, that a lot of these builders, Oberoi, Lodha, all of these guys were sitting on a lot of unsold inventory.
Right.
And now it's gone the other way, where the demand is so much that projects are getting sold out immediately, right? I think that might again go back to what it was after a few years when the supply outpaces the demand.
But look at our clients also. Now, we work with young professionals. We work with people in their early 30s, late 30s, kind of a thing, right? Now, everyone, most of them, at least we have this conversation that, acha, ghar kharidna hai. It's always on the back of people's minds. No matter how much you put in equity, how much you put in debt, or how much you're earning per se, right? There's one thing at the back of your mind ki yaar, ek ghar kharidna hai. It could be on the outskirts, it could be back in your hometown somewhere. It doesn't matter. So still that emotion is there within people, at least our generation, maybe the generation after us also. Till that small emotion is there, the demand will be there, but of course, eventually it has to reduce considering the supply that has increased so much right now.
What I think our advice to people would be just be that don't get caught in the FOMO. कि prices बढ़ रहे हैं इसका मतलब नहीं कि वैसे बढ़ते जाएंगे and next year you'll have to pay double the money. I've had that conversation. Someone is like, हाँ मैं आज अगर 100 का ले रहा हूँ तो फिर अगले साल में रुक के लूँगा तो फिर 150 हो जाएगा. I said that's not how it works. Buy real estate when you really need it.
Correct.
When the softer issues, maybe you're married, maybe you have kids, things like that start outweighing the other aspects. That is when you should go for real estate because it is a very long-term commitment. It's something you're taking a loan for 20-30 years. You're putting in a significant amount of money, not just from your current savings, but from your future earnings as well, because your EMI is going to go into that. So it's a very large decision. Don't make it in haste. Take your time, and when you really need it, then go for it.
And I would also say that see, don't make, at the end of the day, your money should not be idle.
Correct.
If it's if you have money and you want to invest in real estate, that's fine.
Karo.
Exactly. Kuch karo, basically, at the end of the day, right? So if it's equity, then do equity. If you prefer buying real estate rather than your money sitting in an FD,
to bhi chalega.
To bhi chalega. It's better to buy real estate.
My suggestion to most of my clients also is very, very simple. Look, I am in Bombay. We are all in Bombay, right? And in Bombay, if you ask me whether to buy real estate for investment purpose also or for consumption for that matter, I would say a clear no, right? Because your rental yields are 2-3%, and even for investment also, it doesn't make sense that way.
The capital appreciation is limited.
But on the flip side, from their point of view, we are all blinded. because we see Bombay, because we see how bad it is right now to buy real estate in Bombay. The fact that there are places out there, in fact, Gurgaon also for that matter, Indore for that matter, look at these places. Yeah, the price, people have bought it last year and the price have increased by 20-30% already.
Correct.
Right? So we talk about those CAGR, those numbers and everything, how markets have given 20-25-30% in the last 1-2 years. Real estate has done that, but again, it's location specific. And you have to be there at the right place at the right time. That's it.
I remember the podcast we did with Ashish Somaya. He said the same thing, that it's a little counterintuitive and it's a paradox to say that I'm bullish on the economy and equity, but I'm not bullish on real estate. Because
Exactly.
if the
Right.
economy will do well, if everybody is earning more money and the country is in general is prospering, then real estate अच्छा करना ही करना है. So that's why I said I think the conclusion over here is that basically if you have money, you invested in real estate, invested in equity, but invest somewhere. Don't just keep it idle and don't just keep it in FDs or something like that, right? So that's the important point over here. No point discussing or arguing too much which asset class is better. Everybody has their own thoughts, but kuch to karo.
Right.
I think now the real estate bubble also brings us to the equity part of things, because this week again equity markets in India have touched an all-time high.
Yeah, that's basically
Okay.
happening every
Now
week.
what
I
do
think,
every
Yeah. So people want an answer that should I be investing in equity right now, and is it a bubble? And I think I wanted to answer this specifically because people have started equating with all-time high and bubble. Bubble has become very, synonymous. All-time high has become synonymous with bubble. See, just because something is an all-time high does not mean it's a bubble, right? In a growing economy like India, markets are by default designed to touch all-time high.
Correct.
The fact that they're not at an all-time high is an aberration. Actually, if you really closely think about it, the only time markets are not at an all-time high is if there's some uncertainty, right? And I read a really good article from Value Research recently where they said that if you think about it think about a bond. Theoretically, every day it touches an all-time high. Why? Because there's no uncertainty. No,
Correct.
the maturity is fixed, the tenure is fixed, the coupon is fixed. So every day theoretically it touches an all-time high. So why shouldn't the equity markets be any different? So no, bubble and all-time high is not the same thing at all.
And we say this in most of our podcasts also. Now, what has happened is because of this information and how people are viewing things, TV experts, your online experts, everywhere. There are these words that have come out कि ये बोल दो तो ये बिक जाएगा. People are going for views only. Now there is a news anchor who will वो एक बार बबल बोलेगा, वो एक बार बोलेगा कि रिलायंस ये कर चुका है, टाटा ये चुका है, उसको आप बेचो, तो वो बिकता है. Now that's the thing, right? People are हर जगह बस बबल बबल बोलो और फिर उसको बेच दो, पर ये नहीं देख रहे कि markets, how 2021 went, how 2022 went, how 2023 went, right? So it not necessarily be a bubble. It's just how our fundamentals are placed as an Indian economy.
Correct.
And what they are discounting in right now. They're discounting maybe so many other things which are happening in the future, right?
Yeah.
That is the government coming in with the full mandate, the government putting their policies in place which are focused towards growth, infrastructure, just Indian economy growing to what, 5 trillion in the next 2 years, 3 years, right? So with that happen, we have to be in a bubble at all times to reach
So in
somewhere.
that article, there were some very specific points where they said ki how to identify if a certain asset class is a bubble or is it just at an all-time high. So I think 6 points they had mentioned about the Indian economy. One is the earnings of the companies, right? So BSE 500 की earnings अगर आप 3 साल में देखो तो it's been in the late teens or early 20s basically.
Okay.
Corporate profitability has grown at 20%, which is immensely impressive.
Right.
Secondly, valuation, right? If you see the PE ratios of the market, it's not all-time
all
high.
right,
It's
yeah,
not. It's
correct.
all right. Yeah,
Correct.
it's not in the history. Historically, we've been a lot more overvalued than we are right now. Third is debt to equity ratio, right? So if companies are borrowing to propel growth, then that can be a risky strategy. But generally, if their debt is going down, then that is good, right? So companies again have been able to. I think the debt to equity ratio in BSE 500 companies has come down significantly. Fourth point they mentioned was promoter holding. Promoter holding is actually going up.
Increased, yeah.
It's not decreased. What does that say? That says that entrepreneurs believe in their businesses. वो बोल रहे हैं कि all time high है तो भी चलेगा, but मेरे को पता है कि मैं इससे ऊपर भी लेके जा सकता हूँ. So I don't want to sell off my business, right? And fifth is of course the economy consumption. And the last thing they said was dependence on the FII markets. Same thing. If we were at an all-time high 10 years ago, then the scare used to always be that FIIs will start selling and the market will drop. Again, that is not there at all. So they mentioned these 6 things, reasoning very specifically why markets may be at an all-time high, but they are not a bubble. And I think it was a really good article. I think this makes a lot of sense.
Correct.
Also, I'd like to just say that just because we are at an all-time high doesn't mean we need to be taking some action. Sometimes inaction is better
Right.
than taking any action. And very important part of investing or how you can actually create wealth and beat the market or beat others in creating wealth is the behavioral aspect of finance. There's a very interesting study that I read about by Timothy Wilson in 2014, where they put people in a room and gave them some time. They had two options, the participants in the study. Either just sit there and do nothing, or give an electric shock to themselves. And most people in that time period, so 70% of the men, they chose to give themselves a shock.
Correct.
So, given a choice between boredom and physically hurting themselves, most people ended up physically hurting themselves because people just can't take boredom. If you are someone that can work through the boredom and you're okay with it, you can manage the boredom, you're already doing better than 70% of the people out there. If you can just manage that, and if you just learn to say no to all the noise out there, you are out behaving, and that's going to make a significant impact on your wealth creation in the long term.
There was a really good article about with I think Swanand Kelkar had also about how 80% of investing is out behaving. It's not actually out knowing or out analyzing. All you have to do is nothing, and typically you would perform better than most investors.
We keep talking about this data point, wherein if you miss the 10 best days in a year, being in the stock markets, right, your returns like fall up to what, 7-8%. Right, they fall down by 7-8%. Now, the only way you can be invested in those 8-10 days or the best days of the year is when you go through those all-time highs.
Correct.
Those all-time highs are not coming if you decide to just move out of the previous all-time high, right? So to be there, you have to go through this. And as Sayyam rightly pointed out, right, is the behavioral aspect which helps you kind of be invested in those days.
Correct.
And without these, the returns are not going to come to you. Simple.
Correct. Yeah, so I think the conclusion here is also that don't try and time the market, don't try and outbehave most investors out there, and all-time high is not the same thing as a bubble, so please don't use these two synonymously, right?
I think just learn to manage boredom.
Just
because there's so much happening out there doesn't mean you have to react to all of it. You need to do a lot of it.
Correct.
Right.
One more thing that is a little more political, maybe not strictly finance, but at the end of the day, political and finance are really
they go together.
They are two sides of the same coin, really. Lately, India's been pushing for a permanent seat in the UN, and we've really started putting pressure on the 5 other countries who do have a permanent seat. And I was watching, and I think that's really, really important, of course. And I was watching an interview of Dr. Jaishankar, where he's phenomenal. I mean, that guy is insane, by
He's
far
savage.
the best.
He doesn't reply back to people. He kills them. He kills the conversation right then and there.
He's too good. I think we all have massive respect for him. So he was saying that, again, very interesting. By 2075, Goldman Sachs has come out with a report that both China and India will be number 1 and number 2 economy, right? 55 trillion, I think China will be, 52 trillion, something like that, India will be. So clearly we are very close competitors.
Correct.
Maybe right now the difference is very large, but after 10-15 years, we're going to start really bridging the gap, and we're going to be competitors. Now he said, is it fair that a direct competitor of mine has a permanent seat in the UN and we don't?
Right.
And we've seen China do this. They veto everything that is in India's interest. Everything
absolutely.
that is against us, they veto it. Whether it's acts of terrorism, whether it's economic, whether it's political, in every way, they are vetoing us. And I think this is something that as Indians, all of us should be aware of, and all of us should be posting. All of us should be raising more awareness about this, that how can we be a population of 1.4 billion and still not have a permanent seat in the UN? It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. So I'll tell you something. Think about it from this perspective. As individuals, as corporates, and as countries, the only thing better than money is power. Right now, the top 5 permanent the 5 permanent members, right? US, Russia, UK, France and China. Right now, look at each of them individually. UK, forget about it. They are in a recession technically again, like Japan, right?
Yeah, UK is long history.
US and China are the big names over here, the biggest names in these 5. Now they have to be. Their objective has become to make sure that India does not come there because of the fact that they know 18% of the world population is ours.
Correct.
Right? Most of the things we do for UN, including I told you, right, about soldiers, about the peacekeeping within UN, it's our members who go there, around 180-200 soldiers have sacrificed their lives for UN. So all the power, the raw power, the human resource, everything is coming from here, right?
Yeah.
The only way they can stop us is by not allowing us to have that power which they have. So that is what with Ukraine, Russia is the same thing happening. Correct. Right? With China, India, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
The moment we start kind of progressing more than they're liking, they're gonna ask China to do something about it. Correct. So that bit is unfair.
Yeah.
And we absolutely deserve a place, considering now this is going to be our decade,
Correct.
which has already been our decade, and even it's going to top it even more. Ram.
Yeah, absolutely. So just quickly before we leave, let's make a fun prediction on when we think India will get a permanent seat in the US. What year do you think we'll get it?
Modi has said that he's going to take some top calls once he comes back. I think this will be his first call.
So 2024.
2024.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think 2025. I think we should get a seat.
I'm a bit more skeptical. I think it'll be a bit
As
slower.
usual, as usual.
I'll say 27.
2027.
Yeah.
Okay, done. Chalo, we'll come back on this podcast and discuss who got it right. Okay. All right, guys. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you found that interesting. You've been watching our episodes. Please continue to support us. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends. Yeah, we'll be back with another episode next week. Thanks.